Dr. Bennett Omalu was a neuropathologist from Nigeria who knew nothing about football. In 2002, he discovered that former NFL players were going mentally insane and some were killing themselves. He did a lot of research and tried to show this to the NFL. In this, he faced lots of trouble in doing so because people didn't like the idea of him changing America's game. He did not give up on his research and continued to argue, and eventually he created a game-changing rule. Neuropathologist Bennett Omalu discovered chronic traumatic encephalopathy in former NFL players and communicated his findings to the NFL, which sparked fundamental changes to the game.
This all started back in September of 2002, when a former NFL player and Hall of Famer, Mike Webster, died of a heart attack. A lot of people were very confused, considering he was only 50 years old. Dr. Omalu was from Nigeria, so he knew nothing about football. After reviewing the case and Webster's mental struggles, including dementia, depression, and confusion that eventually left Webster homeless, Dr. Omalu expected to find obvious trauma to the brain. Unfortunately, all scans were negative, but in his heart, Dr. Omalu knew that Webster was a victim of the game. Using his own funds, he poured over research and made his discovery. Dr. Omalu did a lot of research on Mike Webster and found out that he played the position of center. He learned that the center position is one of the most vulnerable positions for head injuries because they have to use their entire body in order to protect the quarterback. He believed that increased blows to the head caused brain damage.
A concussion is where your brain goes at a fast speed into your skull. This means that it could possibly crack. This is what happens when a football player's heads collide. Ben Omalu showcased the concussions and what they can do to the brain, like the diagram here. The top left part of the diagram, the forehead, is where the brain shatter is most common. The after effects on this injury may result in damage to the nervous system, memory problems, suicide, trouble sleeping, lack of focus, sensitivity to light and noises, depression, and disorders of smell and taste. The cerebrum, if the skull is shattered, is the most common place for head-to-head injury to occur. And the cerebrum is where you can feel, smell, have movement coordination, vision, hearing, and emotions. This is important for the NFL because if this is continued, more players will suffer from concussions.
Players with multiple head injuries can experience mental instability and other life-threatening side effects. They can hear voices, see things that aren't really there, and can even lead to suicides. As anyone can tell, these concussions are serious and have very dangerous side effects for happening frequently. Dr. Omalu discovered multiple incidents where ex-NFL players that have suffered from concussions either killed themselves or others for no apparent reason. Dr. Omalu found that concussions and repeated head injuries caused a degenerative disease of the brain. He named this disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE.
CTE is a brain disease associated with constant traumatic brain injuries. CTE is a form of protein known as tau. This spreads, and while it is spreading, it kills brain cells, which will make normal life become difficult. Although a concussion occurs right after head-to-head contact, the proteins don't affect the brain cells until years later after the brain injury.
With all of this information, Dr. Omalu could infer that Mike Webster had a serious case of CTE and went mentally insane because of it. One example of the mental instability Webster suffered from were the taser marks on his legs. He tased himself multiple times in order to fall asleep before he died of a heart attack.
Dr. Bennett Omalu communicated his findings by submitting a paper, explaining his discovery of CTE and beliefs that repeated head-to-head contact from his playing career contributed to Webster's death. To the medical journal Neurosurgery, he thought the NFL would be more open about this, considering it was dealing with health and safety issues. Instead, when it appeared the 2005 Neurosurgery Journal, the response was that it had serious flaws and they demanded it be taken out.
Dr. Omalu wasn't ready to give up. Another retired NFL player, Terry Long, committed suicide because he went mentally insane. Dr. Omalu knew that this was again another serious case of CTE, but he needed proof, so he had another autopsy performed on Terry Long's brain. Through the autopsy, he confirmed that Terry Long suffered from CTE. With this research, he submitted a second paper to neurosurgery.
The NFL again responded by publicly saying that this research was incorrect. Many people were also upset over this report because they thought Dr. Omalu may ruin the sport of football.
Football had become the most popular sport in America. Sunday, which used to be the day for church, is now run by the NFL because of the popularity of the sport. This is why people were upset about the research presented by Dr. Omalu. NFL fans thought this was a new change would impact their lives in a negative way, making the sport less entertaining.
However, there's one man who supported Dr. Amala's research. Dr. Julian Bells was a chairman for neurosurgery, who was also a former team doctor for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He wanted to help find a way to make the game safer. He helped Dr. Omalu find a way to communicate with the NFL and make them listen.
In the September 2009 issue of GQ, Jean-Marie Laskus wrote an article including Dr. Omalu's discovery of CTE and how the NFL continued to deny of its existence. Shortly afterward, the league revealed the results of a study determined its former NFL players were suffering from memory-related diseases at a higher rate than the normal population. This was their first public admission that there may be a problem with the game. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was called in to testify before a House Judiciary Committee in October 2009 about safety measures and stricter guidelines that needed to be established in the NFL to limit head injuries. Dozens of NFL players even came out and said that the league had failed to warn and protect them.
Finally, the NFL came to their senses and realized what they were doing was wrong. People's lives were at risk if they didn't make a change. This caused the NFL to add the targeting rule, or unnecessary roughness.
The targeting rule states that if a player lowers their helmet to create head-to-head contact, they will be penalized for it. The team with the player that initiated the head-to-head contact loses 15 yards and could be possibly taken out of the game. This is mainly because this person targeted possibly got a concussion and maybe another case of CTE.
This is an example of head-to-head contact and how CTE starts if this process is initiated. As shown, the player lowers their helmet towards the ball carrier. Number 59 on the defense would be called for unnecessary roughness or targeting because of this action.
Because of Dr. Omalu's research, the NFL added play-protecting rules such as unnecessary roughness and targeting. This was because Dr. Omalu communicated his findings to the NFL, which sparked fundamental or game-changing rules to the NFL.